My name is Brian Gracely. I'm going to cover the road ahead. I've been fortunate enough we've been doing Commons, for those of you that aren't familiar with Commons. We've been doing them since 2016, since the second KubeCon. If you attend any of the KubeCons these days and you see the day before and there's 20 and 30 and 40 sessions, this was sort of the original one. This was the one that said, yes, there's going to be a ton of interesting things that go on at KubeCon, but if you want to sort of dive deep into some things, if you want to get some experience from stuff, we sort of got this thing started. So we've been doing them for quite a while. One of the things that we do, and I've been fortunate to do a number of times, is sort of a look ahead. Where do we think this stuff's going? Where have we been? Where are we going? So I want to kind of walk through that a little bit. Before we get started, congratulations to Corinna. Not only does she put these on and has been running these for a while, but she's got a regular day job, and she was just named as technical lead of the TAG Application Delivery Group. So congratulations. Huge honor. One of the quotes that I like to bring up whenever I get a chance to do these, and I heard this from somebody a couple of years ago, they said, we came to an event, we were just getting started with using this OpenShift technology, and we sat and we listened. And we sat for most of the day. We sort of, did that thing that people do when you don't necessarily know everybody, and you kind of, they're gathering, and you kind of look over their shoulder and you're listening a little bit, or you kind of listen in on a lunchtime conversation. And they said, we did that, we took a bunch of notes, we did a lot of listening, and about a year or so later, a year and a half later, we had about 100 different groups that were running OpenShift and that were deploying applications and developing new applications. And so the thing that we always ask to take away from this is not a session for us to come and just talk to you about products. There's all sorts of those things. You get an email about those every single day. This is an opportunity to listen to people, to meet people, to ask questions. You're going to run into folks here who are building the technologies. You're going to run into people who are using it, and they're going to tell you wonderful things, and they're going to tell you terrible things, right? We love the products for this, and we hate the technology for this, and all that knowledge is useful because you're going to figure out, like, okay, where are the rough edges? Where are the things that look like what I'm doing? So, when you get a chance, introduce yourself to people, ask questions. That's sort of what this day is about. You're going to get a mix of where the technology's going. That's all very cool, but also you're going to get a lot of just practicing of, here's what we learned. Here's how long it took us to do that stuff that was in a keynote 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Or, yeah, we're doing certain things with Red Hat, but we're also doing certain things with their partners, and we're integrating these open source projects. You're going to hear that whole sort of gamut of stuff. So what does the road ahead look like? This is like that question they ask you when you do an interview, and they go, where do you want to be in 5 years? And you really kind of want to ask them, like, well, right now I'd like that job, and 5 years from now I'm not really sure what's going to happen. That's a little bit of what this session is this is where we think things are going, but if we knew where things were going to be in 5 years, most of us would probably just bet the stock market or bet on sports games or whatever it might be. So it's kind of our best guess at where we think things are going. And then the other part of it is this. If I think about the road ahead and I had to explain it to somebody, it starts off something like this, right? Sometimes you're the people in the right-hand lane, in the lane going to the right side, and you feel like, boy, I went to this interesting session, I went to a keynote, I've been reading headlines, and it feels like everybody's that thing on the left. It feels like they're all going really fast. It feels like they don't have any problems, and I feel like maybe I'm stuck. Maybe our company is stuck. Maybe I'm the guy in the green car, and I'm just worried about getting home versus the guy who's the long-haul trucker versus the person who's having to take their kids to sports, right? You feel like, gosh, why aren't we going that fast? Sometimes that's people's road ahead. Sometimes their road ahead looks like this, right? You're loving life. You put the top down, it's warm, you're on vacation, you're not really having a whole lot of burdens, and sometimes you're actually the ones driving on the sand. You're like, I don't even have roads. We're working on some project that the boss goes, well, I'd just really like us to be there, right? You've all had those conversations where the boss goes, yeah, we need to be there, and you're like, but I got 50 questions. They go, yeah, just there, right? That's you driving on the beaches in North Carolina on the sand side sometimes, when you're just like, there's no road, but that's where we're going. And sometimes the road ahead looks like this, which looks a little bit like today, and you think, well, there's clouds on the horizon. They might be great. They might be storm clouds. I'm not exactly sure what's around that next bend. And right now things are changing. Sometimes it's good change, sometimes it's we're not sure change, but sometimes this is the road ahead. And sometimes this is the road ahead, right? You're like, we're not going out there. We're not sure what that is, right? We're not sure if this AI thing is going to be a big deal, right? We got to let certain things happen. We got to let certain elements happen. We're not going out on the roads right now because, quite honestly, you know, we might be slip and slide and we might be doing a bunch of things. That's sometimes the road ahead. And then sometimes the road ahead is this, right? You're out there having fun, your hair's on fire, you're going fast, and then after doing it for a while, you're like, I've been going in the same direction, making left turns, just going in circles over and over and over again, and people are throwing chicken bones at me. And so for us, when somebody asks me like, hey, what's the road ahead? I always feel like you could pick any of these. You could pick any of those as your road ahead, but the reality is for most people, the road ahead is some combination of all those things. And so for us to figure out, okay, well, what should the road ahead be if we're building products, if we're building the next generation of OpenShift, what Mark and Heather and others are building, you kind of have to take all those things into consideration. And so when we think about OpenShift and we think about this community, I always use this phrase, right? OpenShift unlocks the value of innovation, right? We take, we're able to take from this huge ecosystem that's going on with the CNCF and all sorts of open source communities. We try and participate in those as much as possible where it makes sense, where we can help, where we sort of need to participate. And we try and do that anywhere, right? Our story for many, many years has been all about multiple clouds, hybrid clouds, helping people on premises, helping them in the public cloud, helping them out at edges. But the reality is the platform is built for a world of complexity. Because if what we did was a straight line, we never have anybody who comes to us and says, I have a bunch of simple problems, can you guys help us with that? Nobody ever asks you for help with simple problems. They rarely ask you for problems that they think you're going to fix really quickly either. They ask you for problems that they're not really sure what that is. And so OpenShift has always been a platform that's built around a world of complexity. And that's okay. We live in a fairly complicated world. So when I think about the world ahead, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of before and a little bit of where we think it's going. I've been with the OpenShift group for almost 7 years now in various things. I've never once had anybody ever come up to us, not once, whoever said, I have an OpenShift problem. Actually, I never had anybody who ever came up to us and said, we have a Kubernetes problem. They always came up to us and said things like, we're trying to make that container thing work, right? We'd like to make it easier to use. We'd like to be able to, once we decided to use this Kubernetes thing, we'd like to make it work in production because Hello World doesn't make us any money. Hello World doesn't attract us any customers. I need to be able to use this and I need to make the auditors happy and I need to make the regulators happy and I need to be able to make the business leaders happy. They came to us and they said, can you make multi-cloud consistent? Because either we're on-prem, but we've got groups that want to be out in the public cloud. We acquired a company. Whatever happened, we needed to be in multiple environments. And we'd like for things to be as consistent as possible because the idea of adding yet another silo, adding yet another operations team, adding yet another set of Terraform scripts or Ansible scripts or whatever really wasn't on the top of their list of priorities of getting stuff done. And so for many years, we spent a lot of time working on this, right? Making sure that we could, we introduced things like the operator framework. We introduced things like, specific, Terraform scripts to be able to go, oh, you want to install this in AWS? Cool, you're going to need to understand Route 53 and S3 and EC2, but if you want to install it in GCP, you've got to understand different types of networking and different types of storage and different types of IAM and stuff. So we focused on a lot of those things and we tried to make that as helpful as possible, right? And so we'd always sort of said, yeah, there's an OpenShift for that, right? There's a thing for what you want to do, yeah, we do that. Or if we don't do that, sure, let's go about building that. And so more and more recently, the problems have changed, but again, nobody's come to us and said, I have an OpenShift problem. They came and they said, our teams are distributed, right? Back in the day when we first got started, they were very centralized. Multi-tenancy was the most important thing. Now, the line of business says, well, you don't keep up with this pace that I want. Or we're doing an AI project, and I know you guys are doing web-sized projects, so those things aren't going to fit on the same size cluster. What do I do in distributed teams? What do I do when we want to start giving those independent teams sort of their freedom to do what they want? How do we allow them to have their own clusters? How do we make sure those clusters remain secure? How do we manage those? How do we, kind of manage this give and take between developers want to go fast, platform engineering teams want to put guardrails around stuff. We have to sort of deal with that kind of problem. We had people who came to us and said, this is all interesting, but we'd really like it all on one cloud bill. We just signed a $100 million deal with Amazon. We just signed a $1 billion deal with Google or whatever it might be. How do you guys fit in that story? And so you saw us doing things like Arrow and ROSA and things that you could retire AWS quota and Azure quota. You saw us putting products in the marketplace such that you didn't have to think about, well, is paying somebody going to be the friction I really want to deal with? We sort of took those things away. We made sure those were simple. And then people started asking us, okay, well, we went through the pandemic. We either hired a lot, we couldn't find people. Every business is talking about, can we find people? Do we have shortages of skills? And you're starting to see some really interesting things happen. You're starting to see stuff like, Ansible, which is this fantastic tool, sort of, adjacent to the OpenShift community, but part of almost everybody's environment. And people are going, well, why can't you use that generative AI stuff? Like, why do I have to learn Ansible words? Why can't I use my words to describe the thing that I want to do? And so you're starting to see this technology that is cool for ChatGPT become part of IT. It's become part of IT operations and so forth. And we're bringing those technologies in. You'll start to see us bring those technologies in around OpenShift as well, the same way we've done with Ansible. And then people ask us to, how do we succeed with AI, right? It's very hard these days. The conversations almost all feel like they're all either AI, some variation of AI, or variations of security. And that's sort of what happens. Security always comes back around when the economies get a little bit tougher. People go, okay, there's not as much demand for all the new stuff because people are like a little bit hesitant, a little bit shaky on stuff. But at that point, they always go, well, I don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I don't want to be on the front page of Hacker News. I don't want to be on the front page of whatever. Let's double down on certain security things. So you've seen that come in. But we're also seeing more and more people asking about our artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of people, and you'll see a lot of discussions this afternoon, who are going, I don't really know what it is, but God, I do not want to be the person that missed this, right? I'm seeing stuff every single day. I'm seeing stuff where it's like, that was interesting 2 weeks ago, and now it's like, that almost seems irrelevant, and this new thing has come along. And there's all sorts of interesting questions we're trying to figure out. What does it matter where my data lives? What does it matter where my GPUs live? What does it matter, which biases get built into models? Which models should I use? Who should we partner with? Should we use open source models? Should we use proprietary models? So you're going to hear all those sort of things. We've been working very, very hard to make sure that we can answer a bunch of those questions, because there's not one answer. There's going to be a whole bunch of them, right? And so as we think about all those things, that's sort of our what's next. Will there be things that come forward after that? Absolutely, right? We never thought years and years ago that we would put an OpenShift in outer space. We never thought that we'd be, behind, we'd have an ad on the Super Bowl about OpenShift. We never thought that there would be people, running airline systems and credit card systems and all sorts of stuff on that. So the next is always sort of right around the corner for us. We've always been very, very good as a community at not just going like, what's next for show and for headlines, but what's next for the problems that you have. And I think if you ask around this room and you talk to the people who've been around it, that's always been the mindset is, let's go solve sort of business problems, community problems, and do things like that. What that's turned into is, and if you followed OpenShift at all, yes, there are variations on it, but ultimately, there's an OpenShift for all the different places that you're trying to do things, whether it's variations on private cloud, so centralized versions of that, decentralized versions, air-gapped versions of that, variations across every single public cloud, however you want to run them. You want to run them, you want Red Hat to run them, you want some third party to help you run that, and again, sort of manage that into your cloud bill. All that is consistent. All of that is available today, and then obviously we've been doing quite a bit of work in terms of miniaturizing things, bringing things out to the edge. So that one sort of bringing innovation, doing it anywhere, has really been the mantra and has been what we've been delivering for the last 6, 7, 8 years across OpenShift. Yes, there are variations of it. You'll hear different names. You'll hear Minishift, and you'll hear, OpenShift Container Platform, and you'll hear ROSA and Arrow. But at the end of the day, they're all OpenShift. They're all the same technology. They're all the same API. They're all the same way of operating them. They're all the same way of innovating around them. So like I said, there's an OpenShift for that. So one of the things that comes up quite a bit is people will go, yeah, but I could do that myself. It's open source. I could do that myself. Maybe you guys put too many things into OpenShift. I don't need all those things. I could do that myself. And so I've been trying to kind of figure out some ways to talk about that conversation, because it's a great conversation. It's a conversation that has nothing to do with OpenShift. It has everything to do with, should I build something myself, or should I buy something, or should I sort of use something that's been sort of prepackaged, if you will? And so the worst way that I've found to talk about that is to go, well, we do an awesome job of integrating a whole bunch of things. Mark and Heather and others will talk about kind of the roadmap and how we put things together. And there's nothing worse than telling a technologist like, well, I'm better at doing technology than you are, right? It's a no-win conversation. So we've been trying to figure out, how do we define this in a way that, has a little more number to it, a little more. And so we found a number of use cases. We found a number of examples. And what we found was, if we talk about it in terms of opportunity cost, and this is probably more relevant now than it was 3 or 4 years ago when interest rates were 0 and VC funding was just sort of falling out of their pockets. Now when interest rates are a little bit higher and people are concerned about stuff, you have to think about things like opportunity cost. And so what we found is oftentimes when somebody would, we talk to a customer, we talk to a company, decent sized company, they would go, well, it took us about 12 to 18 months to build that thing that looks and feels like what you guys have with OpenShift. So 12 to 18 months. So do you have 12 to 18 months to wait for whatever that opportunity is right now, right? That's maybe the simplest way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, okay, maybe you built it. Maybe you built it for your resume, maybe you built it for the company, but then you gotta live with it. And you gotta hope that nobody leaves the team, and you gotta hope that you can, now that you have a bunch of Kubernetes experts or GitOps experts or whatever, experts, are they gonna stay? And are you gonna maintain it? And so we went and did a little bit of counting, and we looked at, for all the things that go into OpenShift, all the pieces and parts, from Kubernetes to runtimes to Linux level things to CI/CD to GitOps to all those things that we integrate and piece together. In 1 year, if we took the releases that we put into the product for 1 year, there's 134 different things that change. Interactions, so how many times did Argo CD have an update? How many times did runtimes have an update? How many times did Kubernetes have an update? And all those things. 134 different times in 1 year. And 344 patches that came along with those things. So call it 20 or so different projects, right? That's a lot of technical debt to take on, a lot of different opportunities for APIs to break, a lot of different testing that you have to take on. And ultimately, the question you ask yourself is, if I'm doing all that, am I adding business value, or am I just doing sort of platform value? So just wanted to give you a couple of numbers. Again, 12 to 18 months to build it, lots and lots of technical debt to potentially take on, but build might be the thing to do. It might be the right thing to do. We find more and more that the customers and the companies we work with, sort of when you start to live with that stuff, you go, yeah, I'm not necessarily adding value to the company, I'm adding value to the platform. So the road ahead, as I've talked about, I don't have a road ahead for you, quite honestly. I don't have a specific thing that will be in 6 months and a specific thing in 12 months, but I do know this. Like I mentioned, we never expected to be helping people run their 5G networks 5 or 6 years ago. We never expected to be, putting OpenShifts in space, underwater, in outer space. We never expected to be, the backbone of the most popular golf application every April when people watch the Masters. We never expected to be, helping you deal with credit card transactions and airline transactions. But people came to us and they said, here's problems that we have, right? Problems that we don't necessarily see when we go to KubeCon, problems that we don't necessarily see solved when we look just at the projects themselves. And so the one thing that you will get for sure in the road ahead with OpenShift is I sort of use these three pillars, these three kind of foundational things. you will get things that are trusted, right? We will guarantee that the technology will be very leading edge. You'll be working with the people that are not only helping to build the technology in the communities, but are helping to listen to the problems you have. So whether it's trusted from a Kubernetes perspective, trusted from a content perspective, trusted from a high availability perspective, you're going to build on something that you can feel trusted with. You're going to be seeing more and more that the technology is going to be very complete. We have this challenge all the time of, if I'm building versus buying, if I'm going to the cloud versus if I'm building on-prem, how many pieces and parts do I want to deal with, right? How much time do I have to put all these sort of things together? Which of 7 or 8 or 10 or 20 security solutions should I pick? What we're trying to do more and more is help you get very streamlined to, you have a problem, you want to solve that problem, whether it's an individual problem or something at scale. The thing that we help you deliver, or that we deliver to you, is very complete. And then finally, the last thing that you're going to hear, and you saw it in the one picture, everything that we do is built around the idea that at some point, and we've seen this with, let's call it 75 or 80% of the industry, whether they call it multi-cloud or they call it hybrid cloud or they just call it, we've just got stuff in places, we're trying to give you a level of consistency. So whether you're dealing with a planned multi-cloud, we want to be in this cloud and this cloud because we have to be. Whether it's sort of unexpected, we acquired somebody, or this data science group decided to go to Google and this collaboration group decided to go work with Azure. We want to make sure that the OpenShift that you're working with, the environment that you give your developers is consistent, that the way that you can operate it and build your platform engineering teams is consistent, and that when you're coming to us and you're saying, well, we want to deal with this problem and it's here, but that problem could also be here in a year, and we might also need you to shrink it out to the edge, that problem solving is going to be consistent. And so that's, when we think about the road ahead, I don't know what application you're going to come to me with next. I don't know that we're not going to get bored with generative AI and by next year we'll be talking about some other thing. But the road ahead for us, and has been for the last 6 or 7 years, has, when we use this sort of framework, when we use these foundational things, allows us to take whatever ideas you have and whatever ideas you collectively come up with and help you do that better and faster and anywhere you want to.